Okay, so everybody, welcome to this episode of Entering the Creative Unknown. And I am so grateful to be joined by artist Jessie Rodriguez today. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about her work, and then I'm going to show a little bit about her work before I bring her in. So let me read Jessie's artist statement. She writes, I believe art is a transformative medium, and my goal is to connect with the viewer through my work. The power of sharing this visual language to communicate is what compels my art. The creative state can't be interrupted. It has to be protected at all costs, and each new project has to find its own voice. As an artist, I'm only steering the ship. With each new idea, I lay the groundwork, but it is only through the process that each piece is born. Characters, mood, personalities, and design take shape while I'm working with my hands. Carving a print produces unexpected results, and animation creates a new life. I cannot predict what my art will become or who it will produce. I am often surprised by the results, but I welcome them as they take form. Once finished, my new creations join the crew. Everybody contributes to keep it all going. They become stickers, prints, and products that help the tiny ship of being an independent, non commercial artist and animator stay afloat. And when called to, sometimes they show up again in a new animation. I hope to share the gifts that come out of the creative process to entertain, surprise, and ultimately exist while adding more art to a world that I can't help but feel badly needs it. Boy, ain't that the truth. Okay, so I'm going to delight you all just by sharing this incredible animation, and then we'll come back with Jessie. Okay, so I am welcoming you into the room, Jessie Rodriguez, and I wanted to start with that animation because that is how I first became introduced to your work. We were both part of the Dream Animation Festival last year, and when you shared I'm so caught up in the magic of your work. I had no idea even how you do it. So when you sent me your process material, I was very surprised. So thank you so much for joining me today to talk about your process.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Excited to see where this takes us.
Yeah, exactly. So tell me a little bit about how was your creative life birthed?
Um, I think that I've always been kind of creative since I was a kid, since I was growing up. I was always really lost in my imagination and kind of crafting stories and, kind of different things throughout my life. As far as like being an artist, that's kind of a path I've like gone in and out of through my adult life. And a more like if you zoom out in like a professional lens. So I've, studied art in college. It was always kind of the thing I always wanted to do. But that isn't always very realistic in the way that our world, our capitalist everything is set up. So I've, held down a number of different jobs along with the art career that I've had. But I'd say I got kind of really into just recognizing I needed to fully focus on it all the time in order to like see it really come to life more, maybe a few years ago. And that's when I really started pouring a lot more energy into it. And I didn't actually start animating until maybe 2019. So that aspect of my art came a little bit later. And that's one that I feel like it has kind of taken on its own life for me. Like once I got into it, I just was like, I have to keep doing this. It's
Yeah.
so I feel like that really kind of has brought in like a different energy into the way that I work.
Absolutely. And I love the way that I just looking at your work, I feel like it needs to be animated. Seeing the stills, I want to know more. I think I even wrote you one time on Instagram, you had gone to Alaska and you had carved like I think it was a bear and it was a saint.
Yeah.
And I was like, I need to know more. Tell me more. I really think that your work is, I mean, at least for me, I really want to hear and see the story of what's happening behind these magical creatures that you create. So, can you tell me what informs your work? Like, how do you how do you know, or when are you aware that somebody is alive inside of you that's asking to be revealed and given life?
That's a really good question. Because in part, sometimes, in my artist statement, I tried to capture the concept that like my work kind of comes along alive through process, I guess. And so a lot of times it's actually through animating. I'll get through like my ideas and sometimes I'm like frantically carving and like making the pieces as I'm seeing an idea through. And the characters will start to like take their own form through like the ways in which they move as I animate them, if that makes sense. And as I kind of experiment a little bit more with them. Um, and then sometimes like a work will come alive through like a story I want to tell or a feeling I want to express. Or other times it might be like captured, like if I'm doing a music video and it's one that I've kind of, you know, I feel like it'll work with my style, then I might bring it alive in response to like lyrics or something that I'm working with. So I feel like it has different ways of coming to be.
Yeah, I was saying that at the beginning of this that I had no idea. I was so caught up in the magic of your work that I had no idea. And then when I looked at your process, I was like, oh, they're prints.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I find that really interesting. I just want to ask you one quick question because I'm reflecting on I had somebody on here who tells fairy tales through lino cut prints, and I was asking her, what part of her process does she love? The inking, she does a lot of writing, and she said the part that she likes least is the carving.
Mm.
How do you feel about the carving?
I feel like the carving is a really funny part of the process. And part of the reason, so I've been a printmaker much longer than I've been like into my animations. And starting with it, I feel like I'm a hyper perfectionist when it comes to a lot of like processes and art making. And printmaking kind of frees me from that in a weird way because there's almost this like imperfection to it, to the style that I like to do, that's like an exercise of trust when I'm doing it. That sometimes I look at something and I'm like, how am I going to do this? And I like sketch it on the like kind of lino cut rubber that I use. And then I just kind of dive in and see where it goes. Um, and I'm often a bit surprised by the result when it's done because I use kind of sometimes I'll use tools that are a little too big, a little too clumsy for the job, but I like the effect that they get. I like to see the imprint of it. That's part of what I like about a print itself. And so when I'm carving, I actually have quite a bit of fun doing it, but it's like I don't always know where it's going to take me. And sometimes I'm like, this is not going to work. And then I print it and I'm like, oh, I really like that. It's kind of this kind of strange relationship with it.
Yeah, I like the idea of having a physical, I mean, I know that every part of art is physical, but there's something to me that I think about, carving. I've never done it before, but to me, carving feels like such a physical process.
Mhm,
There's a texture, there's a vibration, there's a sound, there's, like you said, you probably gouge sometimes, or you go in the
mhm.
wrong direction, you probably cut your finger, poke yourself. So I actually like the idea of having maybe a little bit of physical discomfort in that process. So in terms of you do the lino cut and it starts to take shape. When do you start to know that somebody is do you ever just go from like a blank piece and you don't know who the creature is going to be at all? Does that ever happen, or do you have a big plan?
No, I always sketch it in some form.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
I'll like sketch it on paper first to try to get a feel for it. So I'll usually have like a couple reference photos going as I'm trying to like figure out how I want to do it. But yeah, I pretty much always have some type of concept before I start the process of what I'm going to make. So I think
And
I start in my head more. Like I start a lot more in like my the way that I do my art is, very I think about it a lot before I get to the point of carving and activating it.
I always ask that question because I'm not a trained artist, and I'm not methodical. Everything is like I always say, if you looked at my floor right now, it's a disaster. There's a pile of bills, there's a pile of paper, there's sculptures, it's just everything all over the place. And I am always inspired by people who have training. I always think there's like a pros and cons to training. Training, I feel like sometimes can get in your head a lot for some people, and maybe can take away from the whimsy, which clearly it has not done in your work. But I also feel like, gosh, if I just sat down for 5 minutes and like structured this out, I probably would have saved myself hours of heartache.
Well, it's funny
So
because I do have training in some areas, but I also don't in others. I've like kind of done this like weird jump from like printmaking, which I already was like kind of not doing the traditional way by cutting it up a lot. And then I jumped to animating where I've been mostly self-taught. I've started to learn more and like occasionally take some classes now, but that for me has been kind of the wild, wild west as I go.
Yeah, so stop motion, it takes a lot of patience, a lot, and a lot of time. So how do you, when you are like, I know it's different for every project, but how do you actually keep your patience and pace yourself? And how do you see, like, what's the process of seeing how you're, because you do things much differently than I do. You're actually using the whole stop motion setup. And I find that really daunting and also really fascinating. So, can you talk a little bit about that process?
For me, I just, gosh, I've had to really like, I wouldn't say I'm better than when I started because I get really obsessive. Like for me, it's about once I start a project, I just like want to work on it around the clock almost. I don't want to like leave. When I used to do my early stop motions, I would actually like injure myself. I'd be kind of like working too
Yeah,
long and not taking breaks, and it
hunched
would,
over.
yeah, and it would just like take over my life. And I was like, this is not sustainable. I have to find ways. So now I work out of a studio more. I kind of like go in and out. I try to I start my process by like once I've come up with the concept, I create the pieces for it. So that in itself can take a pretty long period of time just to like craft the pieces that are going to go into it, like build the sets, if you will. Um, and then once I get to a point where I'm working, I really like to see things through. Like I really like to stay focused. And a part of that for me, I think, is because when I'm working, that's when I get more ideas. That's why I like to leave that like process of working a little open to change and like flexibility to like see where it'll take me. because I feel like a lot of things that come in my work are surprises. And I want that space for it to like come to life.
Okay, yeah. I just want to put up a little another screen here. When you're saying you get obsessive, and I'm just going to go to the next slide really quickly. This is what I think of as obsessive.
Fair. For the record, that's not even near as many pigeons as I have.
Oh, I know. I've seen that. I think like I'm seeing all of the pigeons that I've seen on your site. So yeah, this is what I would think of as obsessive. But what I'm wondering is when it comes to the pieces, you know, when you say that there's surprises, when do you know that like you are in real where it's not just you in the room, your pieces are speaking to you saying like no, like I'm going to say if your pigeons are speaking to you, they're like no, I actually like do all of these things, I don't just do this, and
Well,
obviously you
yeah.
study.
Well, here's a good example. Do you want to go one slide back?
Oh sure, yeah.
And I'll kind of so this film that I made, um, I ended up cutting my bird out, and you see how there's like two birds there? One of them, this was like a complete like happenstance kind of accident, but I had my cutout that I wasn't planning on using. That was just like the bird shape, but it had like naturally been placed over a print of an eye. And there was something about that, and I was like, I love that. And then that it was kind of through chance, and that became kind of a really big part of this animation, this kind of like juxtaposing of like the two birds. And so that was like a happenstance type of situation. That'll happen sometimes also when I'm working with like shadows or multiplane. I love to like play around with like how the light falls. So I guess that's kind of an example of like, just liking to leave it a little bit open to see. And then as far as like character development, everything I make animates differently, and I can't always tell how it's going to work. So that's kind of what I mean about like personalities coming out during animation. Because once I start moving them, that's when I really start kind of like, oh, that's how you're going to be. Okay. It sort of like becomes this other, I don't know, their personalities just show up a bit more.
They really do. And I mean, it through your work, I really see that. And when the people that are watching this, when you go to visit Jessie's website, she has so many of her animations on there that you can watch. You can really feel the different textures, the different kind of light that you use, the mood, the personalities. It really comes through in your work. And like, for example, this feels so much different to me than other, just even this even bringing in the color. Although when I look through, you do have more color, but I feel like a lot of your work is based in black and white. And is that true?
2025 was my black and white year.
Yeah,
I made well, I
it's a
made
reflection of the times.
I know I made four animations and three out of the four were black and white. I have no idea. But before that, I've used a lot of different color in my work. So yeah, just I went black and white last year.
Let me see if I can play this through here. I don't know if I can. Okay, so now maybe we're seeing a little bit more of the obsession that we were talking about here.
So this is a different process. This is rotoscoping, which is done through kind of like tracing frame by frame. So it's more of a drawing technique than a printmaking technique. And yeah, that was one that I kind of learned last year, and I did get a little obsessive with it. So I've been working on some art for a show that I'm having next month at the gallery I'm a part of. And as part of it, I'm working to show a lot of the ephemera that goes around the animations. So that's where I got this idea to do kind of a lot like the larger birds that I'll pair with the piece just to show the kind of amount of work it goes into like, a second of animating.
And how does your work live with you? Like I would want this little guy around me. Like I think I'd put him in my pocket.
Oh, you're talking about him?
Yeah. Or her.
Oh yeah, no, her. You're right. It is a she, I believe. She, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So they're in my studio. Like, they're always available. Sometimes I'm looking for like a really small, ridiculous piece that I like need to use. And I'll spend like an hour looking through every little drawer that I have to find it. But I feel like I take meticulous care with not ever letting them out of my kind of orbit because they do get reused a lot. With the exception of like one of my characters who I always like create from scratch for some reason. The fish.
Okay,
Every
yeah. So
every
when
time.
you, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so after you make the print and you ink it,
Hmm.
what are you inking it on? So it has to have some kind of, or maybe it doesn't, but it has to have some kind of structure, right? To
Yeah,
be able to fiddle with it and move it around. So what kind of paper, what are you inking onto?
I love like thin handmade papers a lot of the time. Sometimes I use fancy papers. Sometimes I honestly just use like sketch pads and things like that. So I don't know if you can see, but like here's, one of my characters from a recent animation who's jointed in one, two, three, four, five, 8 places. Um, but with this character, they're just kind of on a thin piece of paper, and sometimes they're like holding on for life by like, you know, very little. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, but sometimes it's like more of a handmade paper because I like to see textures. Like you can see maybe from an eye that I made, the one that was in the dreams piece, and you could
Oh,
kind of see
uh-huh.
how I got the textures from it. And that one, yeah, so they're all a bit different how I work. It's just kind of what I don't know what I happen to be around and what I find when I'm working. I keep like a big drawer of paper, just love paper.
Yeah, they're so reminiscent of your pieces are really or they remind me of shadow puppets and like the
Hmm.
Indonesian shadow
Hmm.
puppets and they're is that intentional? Is that what you're drawn to?
I think I do love shadow puppets. And I think it was just the style, like as I learned, like with carving out my prints and then going, how do I make them move? And then, yeah, I just started kind of adapting different techniques to make that happen.
So the lighting to me is it really is, and I don't know anything about this process of doing stop motion, but um, something about the lighting, I feel like I time travel when I look at your work, and I always think about that. And that old animation where there's the big moon and somebody sticks something in his eye. Do you know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about?
yeah, the
Okay,
George Million, A
yeah,
Man in the Moon. Yeah.
yeah, the man in the moon. I feel like that when I'm looking at these pieces. So when you have more than one character, and you reference this in your artist statement, how they sort of become part of this big community together. And does that happen? So you were talking about how you intentionally create your pieces, your individual characters, but do you always know who's going to be in relationship with who? Do they inform you? How does the relationship work between the pieces that you create?
I think it's one of those things where there's just some animations that a character returns to. So when I have, when they're originally like born out of, you know, a need to tell a story, because really this is about like narrative kind of like storytelling for the most part, is me finding ways to like express kind of concepts through form. And so when the characters kind of first come to life, they have that role of like, how do I tell their story? And then through future work, sometimes I just am like, like for example, there was one of my animations called Please Don't Feed My Art to the Robots. And I was looking around, and it's this kind of I call it my rant against AI. It's referencing the Moloch scene from Metropolis, and it's my characters being fed into this kind of fiery mouth, um, as reminiscent of like what happens when they're fed into the AI machine. And I needed executioners for it. and I was animating and I looked around and I looked in one of my frames and I have these really silly skeletons I created for a different animation, the mermaid's dressing room. And they're the judges in that. It's kind of a peep show animation. Um,
Yeah.
and I like pulled them out of the frame and I was like, you guys are going to be my executioners. So they got a new job. Um,
Right.
yeah. So, for that one, they came to life. They were the right ones for the job.
Well, and symbolically, that really makes sense that they would be the executioners.
It does. Yeah.
I mean, I'm so glad that you brought up the idea of, bringing in AI and that you have a piece around that because, we're sharing things from our unconscious and we're sharing things from the depths of our soul that we might not even understand yet. And to just put them into the machine is so crazy to me. Even thinking about the idea of, some people are interpreting their dreams through AI, and it's just kind of like, I guess, but I don't know. There's something about it that just feels like you're not holding your own self in reverence, at all. Or
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. I mean, for me, like, making art is one of the like most precious things you can do. And it's something I want to protect. So why would I sign over that trust to something beyond outside of myself, I guess. And what
yes.
do I get from it? Because part of the creating of art is the struggle. It's the kind of like puzzles, the figuring it out. And for me, there's a joy in that.
Yeah, and I also think that like the dreamscape, which is the same place as our
Hmm.
our imagination, it's one of the only untouched lands that are left.
Hmm. Yeah,
So let's
absolutely.
let's preserve it. So when I'm looking at these pieces in particular, or I guess all of your pieces, I'm really drawn to the bird, and I'm wondering what your relationship is with symbolic language, and does symbol inform your work?
Oh, very much so. I think, when I'm imagining a piece, I guess I'll say piece by piece, sometimes they're different. Sometimes it doesn't come into everything, but I often, when I'm thinking about the story I want to tell, it can be like very personal, and it can be, but I'm thinking about how to express it. And I express myself through like visual language, which involves using symbols. Um, so I think I have a lot of kind of that's my style of storytelling kind of is through symbols to um, and I don't expect every time somebody watches an animation, they're going to get the reason or the, why I put into it. They're going to come out with the same interpretation of what I created it from. But that's how I tell my stories.
I also love that work lives, outside of ourselves. So like these three, they have a whole life outside of you once they start to engage with I have my own relationship with these, and we do things that you don't even know about. You know?
Yeah.
Okay, so go ahead.
Well, I guess the part of the reason I think of like, why I like to like protect them coming into being is like, for me, it's just really fun to like have a space where I can create without the pressure of, oh, I'm doing this for a reason. I'm doing this to try to make money, or I'm doing this. I really like to protect that creative space to just be that. Um, so it is kind of this kind of, I don't know, I do it out of a sense of fun, maybe to go, hey, I birthed you, now you have a life, but I might put you on a sticker now because you got to support me too.
Well,
But
right, exactly.
but I
It's like call
protected
your
you coming
mother.
into life. Yeah.
Yeah, call your mother.
Yeah.
I think that I really like that you just said that because it is, as an artist or as a creative or as somebody that does something that's not in the, I'm going to say, the more traditional form of work, whatever it is, it's really easy to get caught up sometimes in like the, oh, I need to do this. I completed this. It got a really good response. Now I need to do this. I mean, it's really easy to get like in these moments of needing to produce. And I really like that what you're speaking on is being in relationship to the pieces that you're making. And when you're really truly in relationship and you're not thinking about, how it's necessarily going to be received, it is like being a mom. You respect these pieces that you have, and I really like that you brought that in. Um, okay, let's talk about this. So this looks like what do they call that when you make oh geez, I'm thinking of like when you go to a restaurant and there's a deconstructed, they're like, oh, this is deconstructed apple pie or whatever it is. So this looks like animation deconstructed. So let's talk about this.
Yeah, sure. So that was from an animation I made in November. And this was like really strange circumstances that I made this one. I had signed up for a competition through this thing called the 48-Hour Film Fest. I've never done a competition. It was just kind of a random thing I did as encouraged by friends who were doing it. And so they give you like a line of dialogue, a genre, a character type, and I had 16 days to complete it. And so I was given drama, um, and then I had my character type had to be a genius, and there was a line of dialogue I had to use, blink and it's gone. And I just went for really sad, devastated owl. It's a 3-minute animation about a very sad owl. And so these are some little set pieces that go with it and this is one of those random things where I often don't document as I'm animating because I'm just like in the space. But I think at the end, I kind of laid them out and just took a quick picture to say, hey, this is a thing I made. But it is a bit of a mess looking at it from my
Well, I
workspace.
don't I don't think so. When I look at things laid out like this, and I know that you're not thinking of it like this, but I always think about like especially you speaking on this competition.
Uh-huh.
You have some cues, you have some formats that you need to follow. So when I'm looking about this at this photograph, I'm thinking about like what is the center of the mandala here. So when you have something like, for me, sometimes if I'm doing, if I'm writing a poem, I'll write the poem just based on there's this one cool word that I really like how it sounds and how it feels on the tongue. And then from there, I'll build out. So in this, or in your how you usually work, what's your center, or do you have a center that you build out from?
I would say the centers for me are each scene, because they're all quite different. So I know in this table, or the picture we're looking at, there's one, two, three, four, six different scenes, but each one is its own entity, kind of. And so when I'm in the process of making it come to life, I'm just entirely focused on each scene, basically. And so it's kind of like a constantly moving center because I close one chapter, I go to the next, and then I complete the maybe taking all of the pictures, and then after that I might editing can create a different workflow or adding music to it. There's kind of like so many different ways that you can kind of alter the experience of it.
Yeah.
um, and I kind of like to play with that, and sometimes I'll you know edit something and I'll really change the order of things, and it's like, okay, well, that makes it feel quite different than where I started. So I'd say it's kind of a constantly moving puzzle until I finally hit my done point with it.
You really captured the sadness in that. I don't remember how you just described him, but poor guy. He really looks down and out.
He had a rough go,
He
that
had a
poor
rough
owl.
time. Okay, so I'm really curious about this. So this is from the animation that I showed at the
Uh-huh.
beginning. And let's talk about, so like I said before, I'm really fascinated by the way that you use light and shadows, and I have no idea how you do this. So can you talk a little bit about this?
Sure. So this one, it's created through a process called multiplane, which involves stacking glass. So there's kind of different layers to it. So in this one, the ghosts that I printed are on the top layer. There's kind of a textured paper on a layer below them. And then in between, I shined a light like kind of up from underneath to capture their shadows as I was moving
Mm.
them.
Yeah, it's so amazing, and I love the way that you drew these ghost eyes.
Oh yeah, and they're carved. Those are, yeah, those are from a
Or
print.
yeah, carved. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think
I
I made
just
three or four different carved ghosts, and they were on a very thin paper. So some of them came out much darker when I printed them. Some came out lighter that you can kind of see the different ways.
The textured paper looks incredible. I love it.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
I love it too. I love textures. I love, I'm kind of obsessed with that.
So this is also from that same animation. And again, the light, and this is where I start to feel that shadow puppet feel. And it gives you the sense of that you're not, you're like spying on somebody, really brings you in. Like you're sort of like, should you be looking in this person's window as you're taking a walk at night? Maybe not, but you kind of have to. That's what it feels like to me.
I love that. You're the voyeur too.
Yeah, exactly. That's really what it feels like. So when you go through the process of how do you decide the mood? So do you already know what the mood is going to be when you're doing the carving and the sketchings, or does that come because the lighting does really create a mood and you've got this sepia kind of feel
Mhm.
to it. So do you already know what the mood's going to be when you're in the, beginning carving, creating process?
I think that comes out through printing, through the selection of what papers I'm going to use. But sometimes I think it really does. Like with the sad owl animation, I was working in a lot of kind of like dark colors and, little pops of color here and there. But I think that there is a cohesion throughout a piece of like, figuring out what story it's telling. And then through that, you tell the story through so many different ways. You tell it through your characters, through your backgrounds, through your color and lighting, and that's kind of what makes it like a complete whole. So, um, I don't know. I think but again, it is kind of like each scene I'm selecting new papers. Each scene I'm kind of playing around with it, how to tell the story. But I do think they have to like work with one another. And I think, when I'm crafting an animation, I am in a certain mood. I'm kind of like telling the story of what it is. So I'm trying to figure out what will speak to that.
It's really wonderful seeing the stills of this too, because, when you watch an animation, um, you're taken on this journey. But this is just looking at this right now, it's given me so much more. I get a little chance to sort of get curious about the things that are in the different parts of this. And I love this life after death, life after death.
Uh-huh.
Like it's really humorous just to watch a skeleton having this, kind of
Well,
reminds me of Beetlejuice.
yeah, well, like if you remember, like with last year's Dream Festival, the prompt was pretty open. We could like, animate our own dreams. So I studied my dreams for like quite a while. And I had this really absurd dream where there was like a woman at a graveyard who was being sold an insurance policy. So like once she died, she could get like anything she wanted kind of. And it was just trying to interpret that through this animation of like this concept of like someone waiting to die so they could then like have their life after death.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see like, she's sort of underground, she's in the unconscious too. I love it.
Yeah.
That's I wonder if there is such a policy that you could get.
Opportunity if anyone listening.
Exactly. A death instead of life insurance, a death
Yeah, death
insurance
insurance.
policy
Yep.
for the dead, for the recently deceased.
Yep.
Okay, so this was also, I saw this, was this in the same
Yeah.
Dream Animation Festival? Okay, yeah, because I've seen this before and I love this little turtle. So this looks like, this feels like very different.
hmm
So what year was this and how long have you been animating at this point?
So I did that one in 2024, which was, I think, the first year the Dream Festival came to be. I'd stumbled on the festival pure happenstance. I was just kind of out looking at, what was out there, and I came across that was a thing, and I was like, oh, that sounds very interesting. And for this one, they actually had you animate, you could pick from three different dreams and animate them. So I actually animated someone else's dream.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, and it was kind of for me at that time, I feel like I was just curious about the process of doing that because I hadn't tried doing that before. So I picked this kind of very strange dream someone had had that involved a turtle and these bees around him at a hill. And then it goes into some jellyfish, which I had to learn how to animate too. But yeah, so that one was 2024. And at that point, I'd been animating. I started about 2019. So
Did each person get an individual dream, or did multiple people animate this same dream?
I think multiple people did animate that same dream. So you could kind of pick from one of three, and that was the one that I was more drawn to.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is this part of the same series of the bear that I was talking about? Did
Yeah.
you create a series of saints? Okay, so I love this little I don't know what you call it. There's an altar feel.
Yeah, I
Um
just made like kind of a little retablo cabinet for it, is what I think of it as.
so when you went to Alaska, was this also created during that same time, when you were in
No,
Alaska?
no, I made Saint Barnabas in Alaska. Let's see, I have him on the wall back here if you need me to grab him.
That's okay.
Um,
You don't need to.
yeah, but I part of the so I did a 6-week fellowship in Alaska in a place called Chilitna Lodge. And one of the agreements to doing the fellowship was that you leave a piece of art there. And I decided I'd do one of my animal saints to leave there. And it felt very appropriate because the lodge had at one point been like a bear hunting lodge. And so I left them St. Barnabas in their library. But yeah, I just started this series a few years ago of these kind of animal saints. Um, and that's St. Mary.
One thing that that I'm associating with this is the first episode that I did of this podcast. I had on she's an iconographer,
Hmm.
and she was talking about one of the things that she was speaking on, because I don't know anything about iconography, but I'm really drawn to it. And she was saying that something about when you have an icon that has a really long nose, that it sort of represents the years of like all of the trouble in their lives. And
Oh,
of course, I'm thinking about that when I look at this
yeah,
horse, because I
St.
always think, why?
Mary.
Yeah,
She's
exactly.
had
St.
some
Mary's,
troubles.
she's been through it. She's been through it, but she's made peace because she's beautiful. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
funny. Okay, so let's talk about this piece, because
Sure.
again, this is another kind of lighting. Is this part of an animation, or is this
Yeah.
a okay?
Yeah, this is a part of an animation I made that was shown on the clock tower in Denver in December. And it was called Solstice, Sol Invictus. And it was kind of to celebrate the winter solstice. And actually, the council from the Dreams animation appeared in that one over a Yule log. They were having a solstice celebration.
Wow.
See, so they do reappear sometimes.
So, what does that feel like to have your pieces projected on a giant building?
It's so funny to me because I work in such a like small way, I work in this kind of really intimate, tiny place alone. And then with projection mapping, your work can just appear. And it's really incredible, honestly, because I love to go when I've had a piece in like a large place. I love to just go watch people watch it. I get kind of a joy out of like being, seeing how people respond to the work, even though
Yeah.
they don't know that I'm like watching them, like, haha, I made that. So it's just a really cool way, that's in downtown. That's a very they call the program that does it, they're called Nightlights Denver, and they call this the People's Projector. So they work with artists to get work on there, and it's just kind of a really like amazing way to have your work shown. But
Yeah,
yeah, it's really
it's
fun.
so special and magical, and it's like, yeah, it's like that feeling of when you watch a TV series where the person in the series, like, they made it on Broadway and they see their, you see like yourself so big there. I kind of get that feel, but um I'm really kind of interested to know that when you project on those big buildings, how you keep the quality of your work. It's huge. So,
Yeah, I mean, you shoot it in high quality, and if you
yeah,
expand it, it's going to be in high quality too.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's just making sure that, you know, you're not putting something up there with low pixel ratio or
Right,
something that'll get
exactly.
distorted unless you're going
Exactly.
for that. But
That
yeah,
would be my pieces. They'd
yeah.
be like, no, I'd be like, what? What
Well,
is that? They're just,
it is really fascinating sometimes. Like I was in Lisbon last like a week and a half ago for this film festival that was as a result of the competition, the Sad Owl. And so that animation played in this theater, this Sao Jorge theater, like in the and it's this beautiful historic theater that's like huge screen and there's something fascinating sometimes about sitting in this theater and like this thing that's so tiny that I started is all of a sudden on this huge screen and it's like, hey, they look so great up there. Like it's really, really fun to see them that way.
yeah. Um, that's really exciting. And I love that people can see when you go to Jessie's website that you can see on her demo reel, she shows some of her projections on the buildings, and it's really wonderful to see. Who's this ballerina and what is this piece?
You might recognize her, Stacey. She was the giraffe from the council from the Dreams animation. And she appeared in a music video I made in Alaska called Swing for the Fences. That's kind of about these characters like working to find their way to their dreams. And she wanted to be a ballerina.
I love it. So these are all saints. And again, I'm really interested and I'm going to do this. I'm going to actually, I can't wait for my friend to see this episode who does the iconography
Yeah.
because there's probably something there. Were any of these informed by actual saints or stories about saints, or were they just strictly from your imagination?
I feel like I'm going to get in trouble with your friend because they're very tongue in cheek. We have on the left Saint Catstopher, then in the middle
Yeah,
in
that
God We Tusk, and then on the far right we have the Holy Goose. Um,
I love it. I don't think you would get in trouble with her. I
okay.
think she'd find it very whimsical and wonderful. That's another thing that I'm sort of learning about through these interviews is that regardless of the work, it's not so serious. It's still an act of creating. Of course, you do have your reverence and your that bring pieces to light, but or that are maybe your inspiration can be something that you feel very connected to spiritually or whatever it is. But the creative process in and of itself, regardless of what you are creating, has humor in it because it just does. Something's gonna happen that nobody knows about. It's gonna be the most frustrating day. You hated the piece, you painted over it, so I feel like every piece, if you look deeply, has humor in it. And sometimes it's at the surface, and sometimes, just like these humorous pieces, there's depth to it because you're creating it and you are a soulful being. So I don't see anything wrong with
Well, I do think,
this.
I know not specific to the pieces you just showed, but just in general, when it comes to creating, I do think of art as kind of a language and one that you can kind of like use it to tell your stories in a way that is like different from words. And that can, it can be I do think of it as transformative because you can take, dark things that have happened, trauma, grief, all types of things and express it in like an alternative way that I often don't have words for, but I find like visual language for.
I fully agree. And, I think that our dream maker or our imagination, our dreams are speaking in images for a
Hmm.
reason. And I think that once you get those, in order to heal, you sort of need to get the things out on the paper so you can look at it outside of your body.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's what I love about doing this kind of work. I mean, the artwork that I do is the reason why I created art is just because of that. It wasn't to be an artist. It wasn't
Hmm.
to, my motivation was just like, I've got to get this out so I can look at it without the lens of whatever it is, shame, guilt,
Hmm.
embarrassment. So I appreciate you saying that. And I want to talk. I'm looking at all these wonderful pieces, and you can tell me why you shared this slide. But I'm looking at this like goat in a necktie. Is that right?
Yeah. Oh, it's a sheep. Yeah. A sheep
A
in a
sheep. Yeah, a
tie.
sheep. I love it. So when you lay all these pieces out, obviously you've been printing your St. Mary's, but
Hmm.
is this just you preparing art for sale or for pieces?
So this I took I don't know, maybe a couple months ago because I'm preparing for an art show that I'm having, or yeah, an exhibition I'm having in May. And the title of the exhibition is Flight Risk Birds in Peril, because it
Mm.
seems like I really, torture my birds a lot. And I don't know what that means. So it's kind of an examination of why they fall into depression or why I do this when I'm animating them. And so I was making a lot of prints so that I could scan them and do different things with them because I'm creating some of my animation scenes large scale. So that table is just kind of a table of chaos that came from me beginning to design what I need for the show. And then St. Mary, she just got thrown in the mix. I was just printing a few of her that day. She had nothing to do with it, but here she is. This is just the general chaos I work under, I guess. It's
Yeah.
another.
Well, that's a good thing to show, but it doesn't look chaotic, honestly. Okay, so this is like your actual setup. So
This
can
is one
you
of them,
sort of,
yeah.
yeah, can you give like like if you were to like just give a breakdown, like a diagram of what we're looking at here?
Sure. So I have this kind of like little interior desk that I have a curtain around the back that I work from so that I can control the light. And it's for when I'm doing these really like small scenes that I'm trying to get shadows from. Um, and so this was a good example of like, it's from the Crumbs animation, where when I shot it, initially I thought I was just going to be laying the kind of letters down, but I put them on sticks and I learned like by shooting them how much I liked getting the shadow of the letters behind them. And that's what I ended up using in the title of it. So that's where I just like to leave it open. So you see on the top, there's like an overhead rig. I don't have my camera attached on the top right, but that's where I would attach my camera. There's a couple lights in the scene. One's kind of pointed from below, so I could get the back cast shadow, one from above. And then it would be me under a curtain taking a lot of shots.
Mm, I really like the shadow in the back too. It reminds me of when in like a cartoon where you see like the little mouse, but it looks like a giant monster when
Yeah,
you look at the wall.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that feel. Okay, let me stop sharing here. So this has been, I just wanted to mention that, and I'll put this in the show notes, but Jessie is based in Denver, Colorado. And I am presuming that your show is going to be in Denver,
Hmm.
Colorado. And I definitely have a lot of people that watch this podcast in Colorado. So
Oh,
I'm really
fun.
hoping that some of them will stop by your show. But can you tell me a little bit about what's coming up for you and what you would like people to know?
So I feel like I'm really, really in the weeds right now. Um, as I prepare for the show that I'm having. I'll talk a little bit about that. So it's in Denver. I'm a member of Edge Gallery, which is in the West 40 Arts District. It'll open on May 8th. And um, part of my show is I'm organizing 8 animators who I've gotten to create animations to entertain my depressed pigeon on his TV. It's called The Pigeon's Living Room, a mini animation showcase. Um, he's part of my Birds in Peril. And then yeah, I'm kind of building out the larger gallery to like show, various animations, lots of rotoscoped pigeons, and um, my suffering birds. So that's happening. I'm also putting together an animators showcase the following week at a place called Wolf Love Studios, which is kind of a place. They do a monthly event that I've met a ton of animators through in Denver called Weird Theater, where it's kind of an open mic night for filmmakers where you go and you
Oh,
bring your
yeah.
work. And it just, all these animators came out of the woodwork when they started having it. So I've, gotten to work with animators who do wildly different work than I do. But we're putting together an animators showcase the next week that'll be open to the public to kind of come and be kind of an animation festival. So yeah, I'd say that's the bulk of my energy right now is going into staying focused and getting that done. I'm also creating another animation for a film fest in Colorado called the Side Hustle Film Fest that is in June. And that is my many, many rotoscoped pigeons that I'm making will be in that that I'm
It'll
working
all
with.
be worth it.
Yeah, that I'm working with a musician to make the music for. And yeah, so
Oh,
that's
that's
going to be a
fun.
thing. I have to skip the dream animation this festival this year. I'm too busy. And I also haven't had dreams about their prompt, which is urban landscapes. So sadly, I think I have to sit this one out.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I feel like I can see the future a few months ahead right now, but getting to the other side of this bulk of work.
I think that's all we have the energy for, anyways,
Yeah.
these days. We can't look that far ahead. I am so grateful for you joining me today. And I also just wanted to say that if you're watching this, please stay until the end because I'm going to be sharing a process video. So you'll get to see Jessie's process, and I'll be sharing all of her upcoming stuff in the show notes and her website and her Instagram. But I'm just so grateful to have been able to sit down and talk with you and get a little glimpse into how you work because I just find your work so magical. It makes me really feel transported not only like into the imaginal but also like I said I sort of feel like I time travel when I look at your work, and I really like the feeling of time traveling. So thank you so much for
Oh,
sharing yourself today.
thank you so much. This was a really fun conversation. And yeah, it's just a joy to be able to kind of like talk about the creative process and all the
Yeah, I
places it
agree.
goes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.